This video is sponsored by Incogni. Ring ring! Pick up the phone! It's some creepy person who is gonna blackmail you, or do some crime stuff to implicate you, or who knows what wacky thing it is this season. Oh no, wait, never mind, it's a trans episode or two. So, yeah, we're talking about Pretty Little Liars, a show that asks the question, what if people took high school drama way too far and too seriously, committing a ton of resources to getting revenge on a bunch of people that you don't like because they're annoying or did something bad to you one time that really isn't worth the effort you've gone to, as almost every single villain who dons the name A and attempts to get to the liars seems to be.
It sucks we didn't get to make that phone call. Ring ring.
Who are these liars? Well, it's 5 girls who formed a sort of mean girl clique, with Aria, Emily, Hannah and Spencer being the ones that we grow most familiar with, as their former leader Alison De Laurentiis disappears in the first season, and that forms the basis for the mystery when combined with the whole A person who calls them up and reveals secrets and dodgy stuff about them. There is also Uber A and Big A and the A team and the AD person as well and the AD team, so yeah, you know, it's a mess.
I understand.
Did you know the whole thing was based on a book series that has way too many books in it? Like, I'm talking 20 novels in total. Regardless, the important thing from all of this to understand is that our trans character is a person named Charlotte De Laurentiis, the twin sister of Alison De Laurentiis, and also one of the A people who committed a bunch of crimes to get at the liars, like kidnapping and murder. Now, here is the thing though. I say that Charlotte De Laurentiis is a trans person, and that is technically true. The character is indeed a trans woman, but that's also not something that we find out till the episode that we're talking about today first and foremost. That of Season 6's Episode 10, as it forms part of the big revelation for the mid-season 2-parter finale. Before we do this though, I need to take a quick break in my rambling, as it always is, to tell you about the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. Did you know that everything you do online is being tracked and sold by data brokers, who generally have somewhere between 0 and negative 100 morals and scruples about giving your information to the worst kinds of people to use and abuse? Well, that's all true, and Incogni is a service that allows you to take back control of your data. When you sign up and give them permission, they go through all the potential groups and organisations that have got their little grubby mitts on your data, and they request your personal data be taken off the market, as well as ensuring that it keeps happening and staying off the market so nothing leaks through. This can be important in cases where you might have personal details that you don't want getting found out, like family members that are linked to you on a website that you don't remember agreeing to let do that. Something that I have some personal involvement with, thanks to targeted harassment that also splashed onto people I knew in my personal real life. Or those brokers who lump people together into large groups based on discriminatory labels that are then sold to companies for them to use in either targeting you for that, or letting potential employers know information about you that you might not want them to, or that they have no real right to. Something that is very prevalent for the discriminated against group at the centre of today's episode. Trans people. Sometimes you don't want people finding about all that trans stuff for good reasons. So if you want to make sure that people don't have access to your full name, your government numbers, your relatives, your home address, your date of birth, your phone number, your email, your IP, your finance numbers, you name it, and they've probably got it, well, the best way to deal with that is by going to the link on the screen right now, or in the description, and subscribing to Incogni. At that link, incogni.com/Simpson, you can get a 60% discount when you sign up, alongside a 30-day money-back guarantee if the service is not to your liking. Protect yourself online. It's really important to do. Anyway, with all of that said, we can now return to the ramble again, although this time, it's a sponsored and paid for ramble, so you can call it professional. Pretty fancy, huh? From her first appearance in Season 3 and the next 50 episodes after that, there is not a single trans thing to mention or talk about.
Something wrong?
Which does make this a lot easier. Obviously, it means I can skip all the way to the end of the story, but it also does kind of point us in the rather sudden and poor taste usage of the transness for this villain. I mean, a lot of people who are fans of the show also seem to forget that she is trans, something which I imagine is because of how tacked on and tacky it feels. And don't worry, we will definitely be getting into the showrunner of this series, Marlene King, and what she had to say about the quality of the trans representation from the show that she was making. But yes, so you get the idea. It's a ton of wacky, silly, drama, mystery stuff for a ton of seasons, and then we get to what we care about, the big revelation of how Charlotte De Laurentiis, or Cece Drake, or Redcoat, or Zombie Baby Doll Stalker, or Vivian Darkbloom, or Big A was actually born a man named... Is it offensive to reveal the dead name of a fictional trans character? Like, the show doesn't have any qualms about it, but shouldn't I be better than the show? I'm getting told by the mini LGBTQ lawyer in my brain that it doesn't fucking matter, and I should move on because nobody's gonna care if I say Charlotte's dead name or not. So, let's get into it with Season 6, Episode 10, Game Over Charles. Oh god, you see what I mean? They put the dead name in the title of the episode, and also kind of use it to imply that the dead name is like the secret real name of the character. Which, you know, for fuck's sake, what a bad start already. Okay, before we even get into this episode, let me just take a minute here and talk about all that prior stuff that happened with Charlotte so far. Because, like I said, there was no trans element whatsoever before it was literally used as this big shock reveal. We had heard a bit about Charles De Laurentiis, the dead name of the character, because the liars had discovered it and then linked it to Big A. And there had been this whole setup of them trying to figure out who this person is and how it all connects to the big, overarching, complicated as shit plotlines that end up becoming the norm by season 5 and 6 of every American teenage mystery drama. See, well, all examples of that. I'm a big Riverdale fan. This is some bread and butter shit for me.
He claimed to be the devil.
That guy is the devil.
But the very fact, the very notion that all we get for the Charlotte being found out to be trans is to have it as a twist for a villain is immediately a distasteful one. Firstly, having it be treated like this is reminiscent of that whole usage of trans identity as a way of making a villain some gross or disturbed person, a la Psycho and Silence of the Lambs.
Would you fuck me?
And secondly, it doesn't do any work to be transgender representation, more being just something for the cisgender audience to be shocked by. If we had more time up to this point, really going into Charlotte, really giving this trans identity some depth and breadth, it would be a different story, because it would feel developed. It would feel like it was an earned reveal for the liars that wasn't just a reveal that relied upon the audience's sensibilities and was sprung on us with no warning or build-up. But it does happen like that, and going into the episode, it is important to acknowledge that while this isn't a great start, the important thing now for the trans side of it is to make the reveal something that doesn't lean into stereotypes and harmful recreations of this mockery of trans people as mentally ill, disturbed monsters who are turned evil by their psychological distress and past. And it's also important to see that development happen now that a character is officially trans. One of those we will find out as we discuss and commentate on the episodes featuring Charlotte, and the other one will become evident in its success by the end, when we look back at what happened post Charlotte being found out to be transgender and ask if they bothered to really do anything with it or just moved on as quickly as possible from the trans twist. Alright, let's get back to the episode. I've had my little tangent rambles now, it's time to do some actual fucking work.
Charles. Oh my god.
Anyway, The episode starts with the last one left off, with the liars running through this big fancy prom building after Charles, which is I think supposed to be a flash forward because we then jump to all the liars hanging out together and trying to figure out where Allison, who is Charles's sister, is. And I will admit, I'm a little bit confused, but I'll do my best to speed us forward as quickly as possible to when things actually matter in this episode for our trans analysis.
You've been such a bitch to us, but we heard your story. We understand.
They futz around a bunch, they meet Mona, who is the other kind of a bad person sometimes. Like, she's also another one who wears the mantle of Big A at some point and doesn't like the liars sometimes, so I guess this is kind of like a cross-side team-up to find Allison.
It's easier to forgive an enemy than it is to forgive a friend. Oh my god.
We get reminded that Charles is really dangerous and could do anything. The liars go through a couple of suspects about who Charles might really be. Allison gets dragged into a kind of creepy cell room full of pictures of them and their family, but their face has been covered up by the face of Charles instead. Her dad is, I don't know, like dead outside of her cell, which is probably meaningful to someone who was really invested in this show.
Oh my god. Dad? No!
The liars plus Mona find a secret tech room which closes on them, and then they see a touchscreen on a desk which creates a holographic screen showing the cell room that Allison is in, where it's very funny because like it's meant to be this big moment as we see Mr. De Laurentiis and Jason De Laurentiis dead on the floor, but the cameras that they are using to watch this on don't seem to really properly align to where any cameras could feasibly actually be in the scene, and they conspicuously also don't include Charles in it at all. So Allison's just like talking to someone off screen on the camera that they're watching this on.
Oh my god, Allie's with Charles.
It's just sort of funny to me that the liars here are getting the exact same soap opera experience that we in the audience are receiving from the cameras. Then Charles turns around as the holographic screen camera zooms in on their face. I guess the camera's having a flair for dramatic shots and knowing when to do close-ups. And boom, surprise, it's actually Charlotte.
Don't be so dramatic, Allie.
Cece?
Yeah, so now everyone knows. Also, Mr. De Laurentiis and Jason aren't dead, because of course they aren't. It was just a red herring to make you react more. It's all about the shock value, which is why the trans element is immediately concerning. Everyone is shocked, but not necessarily for transphobic reasons. They might just be surprised to find out that Charlotte is again being a villain and harassing them.
She fell. Are you sure you're okay, Arya?
Charlotte then lays out the fact that she has some big plans, sings at the camera because I guess she just assumed that the liars would be there at this point. Seems rather fortunate for her, or this would all be wasted effort. The liars now finally catch on to what's going on a little bit, as they say plainly for us in the audience that Cece is Charles, and also question if she's actually a she.
Wait, so Cece is Charles? She is a she, right?
I mean, they do all call her by the right pronouns, apart from that one bit of questioning, so I guess, so far, fine. Charlotte then talks about how nobody understood how much she loved Allison, that she never left her side after the parents came back with her, that Allison was like her own living doll. Moving a little bit to the creepy, not so good side of transgender representation, let's try and not have all of this tie into dysphoria or something, because I think I really want people to not see trans people as being obsessively possessive of women's bodies and identities and people as dolls. Ideally.
You were like my very own living doll.
We get a flashback of Charlotte when she was younger. We see her doing pretend play at a tea party, which is I suppose what people commonly think of when they think of girl shit that kids get up to, though that in itself is a little bit problematic. Girls can do other things. They can express their femininity in a lot of ways. And just because a boy plays with tea sets doesn't mean that they're secretly a girl or trans. Younger Charlotte puts baby Allison into the bath because a bath makes them feel better when they're sad, and then just sort of lets the baby go under the water because, I don't know, I guess we're meant to see this as some sort of sociopathic tendencies or whatever, but I just see it as a kid not really understanding how things work.
Mom, baby, I will help you. Ellie, it's okay.
Charlotte gets sent to a psychiatric ward place because I guess Charlotte has a lot of problems in the parents' eyes. Kind of a fucked up thing to do to a young child, but I guess the De Laurentiis family have been set up to not be so great. Especially the dad, who does constantly seem to be a bit of an asshole. Back in the present, after, I guess, relaying the story to Allison, Charlotte gives us the spiel about how for as long as she can remember, she asked her parents to buy her dresses, which was denied by her father, and so she played dress up secretly instead. And yeah, it does definitely seem like the dad might be a huge piece of shit who found out that his daughter was trans, shut that shit down, and then found an excuse to chuck her in a psychiatric ward and then never think about her ever again. Pretty dark stuff. This sympathetic background shit for Charlotte continues. We learn that her mum still visited her, and every time Allison got an outfit bought for her, Charlotte would get given the same one. Then we move to another flashback where Charlotte is on the roof wearing a dress with this girl called Bethany, a girl who is supportive and calls Charlotte beautiful, so big ups to Bethany.
You're beautiful.
These two kids talk about how to get out and stay out of the facility, which is mostly used to illustrate the skills by which Charlotte would become known later on, specifically being a very convincing and quick on her feet liar. Then a random woman turns up who Charlotte is worried about because I guess if she gets seen wearing dresses and it gets told to the guards or something, they will take it all away from her, so you know, bad facility, not being trans supportive, naughty naughty, and Bethany helped stop this by pushing the woman off of the roof. Yeah, that was the only solution to the problem. Clearly, no other options available. Then Bethany uses this as an opportunity to put the blame on Charlotte, saying that Charlotte did it and also calling her a freak. So I will, in fact, be taking back that thing I said earlier about Bethany being supportive. Big not ups to Bethany. Everyone will let you down in these drama shows, I guess.
You pushed her, freak.
Oh, and apparently the woman who got pushed off the roof is related to some person called Toby that the liars know, and that the event changed him because he thought she committed suicide, thanks to the De Laurentiis paying the facility off to rule it like that, instead of it getting blamed on Charlotte like Bethany had intended. I don't know who Toby is, but I do like the fact that this is doing the classic shit of just having everyone connected to one another so they can keep the story thread somewhat tight. It's like Once Upon a Time, another show that I'm currently watching, in which you can bet your ass that every single fucking thing is gonna end up going back to some dude called Rumpelstiltskin at some fucking point. He is well and truly the linchpin for everything that goes on in the show.
We didn't get a chance to finish our duel. Not now.
The liars then have reactions to this, in which they refer to Charlotte as a he and as Charles, because I guess they see it as them talking about past Charlotte, but just as a general rule, I would advise referring to a trans person as what they are currently called and go by at all times. It just causes less dissonance and doesn't lead to cis people feeling justified in dead naming and misgendering a trans person, something which I find does not need more excuses for. Then I guess there was a fake funeral for the Charles identity, which came at the same time as Charlotte's mum finally accepting her as a woman, before Charlotte then gets dumped back in the mental facility under her new name.
And then Mom finally accepted me as her daughter. And I thought I was gonna get to go home.
Odd stuff. The liars then get to play around with Charlotte's magical camera bullshit tech, which shows them the mental ward and a red coat person setting up some explosive barrels to presumably blow up the facility, and the liars then come to the conclusion that Charlotte is gonna blow up the place as a big finale, which is also presumably where her and Allison and Jason and her dad also are. So I guess she's gonna kill all of them with the explosion. Not to do this again, but it is still continually funny that our main characters are spending this entire time watching the same things that we are on a screen rather than, doing anything at all. Like the writers locked them in there and then said, "You will learn the exposition for our big twist. You will sit here and you will watch. You will not do anything interesting."
And now we know who taught A how to treat people like dolls.
Mr. D abandoned him, and Mrs. D taught Charles how to be A.
In another flashback, we learn that Charlotte got leave to attend classes from the facility because she was smart and did good school stuff. Look, I didn't do good school stuff. Why do you think I'm here talking about TV shows and not planning elaborate murder and kidnapping and framing schemes on a bunch of people I don't like? So good school stuff is the best I can call it. Charlotte uses these classes as a chance, however, to go and see her family, calling in a bomb threat to visit Jason, and then telling all of us that the flirting we see them do in the flashback did actually lead to her dating her own brother for a bit as CC Drake, the fake personality that she uses for 3 seasons on the show.
I'm Cece. Allie talked about you. She talked about all of you.
She does tell us, however, that she never slept with him, which is why he was so frustrated, but that doesn't really make me feel any better, and also does feel like it's another thing in the not so great camp for a trans villain to do. I don't want us getting tied to incest. It's just generally not a great thing to be tied to. And she said she never slept with him. Didn't say she didn't kiss him or stuff, so gross?
I know what you're gonna say. It's screwed up that I dated my brother.
Did you guys? Okay, that's just sick, Allie.
Then Charlotte does some self-affirmation, I guess. She talks about how beautiful she is while looking in the mirror as ominous horror music plays and Allison gives her a weird look.
I mean, look at me.
Yeah, it's good to feel good about yourself, but I think the show might be taking this in a Charlotte got her sense of confidence out of having her brother be into her and be narcissistic about how she looked, and that's bad, and maybe tied in some way to her trans identity, and that's something we should be creeped out by as a presumed cis audience sort of way. I feel like that's what the show wants us to think, which it's easy to see transphobic elements when all the signs are pointing that way, when it looks like transphobia, it might just be transphobia. Charlotte's mum then discovers that this is all happening and has an argument with Charlotte about it. An argument that ends with Charlotte discovering that her family thinks she is really actually dead. That her mum lied to the rest of them about the grave and pretended it was real. The grave that was used to let Charlotte transition in the first place, but stay in the facility, which is certainly a pretty rough way to do a transition. You're allowed to transition, but you have to go back into the mental ward that you don't feel like you belong in. It also kind of leans into that cisgender perception of transitioning, wherein it's this clean cut, you go away for a month, and then you come back and you're the other gender now, bada bing, bada boom. A surgeon sees you for a second and fixes all the stuff, which is very, very wrong, and yet something that I do see continually repeated, in a way that I think might actually be harmful.
But she's gonna be just fine.
I think we maybe need cis people to learn more about the trans process and not see it shuffled off screen and brushed away. That might help cis people not struggle so much when they see trans people who don't so readily fit into the binary stereotypes and perceptions that they have in their head, or expectations they have in their head. Anyway, Charlotte as Cece goes with her family on a big vacation, giving her the chance to hang out with them in a way she was never able to as a kid, which is kind of sweet if you ignore everything about it. But then we find out that Bethany, that piece of shit from earlier who took my kind words and twisted them against me like a real monster, Well, she found out that Charlotte and Allison's mum was having an affair with Bethany's dad, and so dressed up like Cece to go and attack Charlotte's mum in some sick sort of revenge.
She was gonna hurt Mom.
God, this plot is complicated. Could you imagine trying to explain to somebody the plot of this series? That would take like 7 or 8 hours of YouTube content. No, I'm not gonna do it. I have a Riverdale video to focus on, for God's sake, and that one's like 20 hours or something.
A lot can happen in 7 years. Archie had been in a war.
Charlotte then attacked who she thought was Bethany, before it turned out it was just Allison awkwardly standing outside the house and looking into it in the middle of the night, all of which is done right in front of their mum, so you can imagine how that went down. Well, imagine no further, because how it went down is that Charlotte's mum buries Allison while Charlotte cries and begs her to forgive her. Also, yes, it is funny that Charlotte keeps accidentally almost killing Allison in front of her parents. Like, sure, it could be a case of her being an unreliable narrator who actually is dangerous to Allison, but it's much more hilarious to think of it as just her being naturally dangerous for her sister to be around. Like, she can't help but keep hurting her in these more and more elaborate setups that make Charlotte seem crazy, because there is no way this can keep accidentally happening, and yet it does. Back in the viewing room, where the main characters are continuing to do nothing, Mona then reveals that she accidentally killed Bethany that same night, as she was intending to kill Allison with a shovel, but instead hit Bethany because I guess both of them were just standing outside on the lawn and watching the house?
But if Cece hit Allie, Bethany had blonde hair and she was dressed just like Allison.
What the fuck is happening? I'm getting distracted from the trans stuff here, because Pretty Little Liars keeps getting bored, I guess, and throwing out more completely unnecessary twists that are meant to keep you in a perpetual state of shock as a viewer. I mean, you can't question it, I guess, if you're busy thinking, holy shit, what just happened? Mona is clearly cut up about this, because I guess she was fine with killing Allison, but killing Bethany feels bad, because Bethany was an innocent person, though, as she is quickly reminded, the show quite literally just told us that Bethany was also a bad person who had killed someone already, so absolved, I suppose.
I killed an innocent person. Bethany wasn't innocent.
Also, to make it clear, Allison didn't die here. She was prematurely buried by people who I guess didn't bother checking to make sure, and instead the body that was dug up and declared to be her in the previous seasons was actually Bethany's body. Oh, the tangled webs we do weave. Charlotte goes back to the mental facility, with her maybe pretty seriously harming her relationship with her mum from all of this. Then Mona turns up at the facility, and all of that kinda tails into Charlotte getting the information on the liars, and setting herself up to become one of the A-people during the show. But yeah, from this point onwards, it's just a lot of Charlotte telling us about her side of events that went down during the previous seasons. Stuff that, as we know, doesn't have any trans element to it whatsoever. Though I do want to quickly talk about this scene here, wherein Charlotte goes outside of a cafe and then looks into the window at the liars after just some lying and conniving, and like, what the hell's going on here? They clearly shot this scene afterwards, because the window in it isn't actually a window scene at all. It's clearly just a screen playing the scene as it continued in the previous season. That is an insane choice, and one that really makes you wonder how they thought they could get away with it. The girls are 2D in the window. It's obvious as shit, guys. Most of this is just used to justify why Charlotte hates the liars. That she was told how they were all bad friends to Allison, and it's very clear that Charlotte is quite close to her sister, despite almost killing her twice. Something that does feel a little tied to the trans thing, and not in a great way. All of this leads to Charlotte and Allison having an argument over what Charlotte did. Allison telling Charlotte that she can't just use people like toys, and Charlotte insisting that she can, and totally did, doing so while going a bit into her holographic screens.
Yes, I can, and I did. But I love all of my dolls.
Which I guess uses that new 3D tech that cinemas got to give them some depth on the screens. Fancy stuff, all being done for the benefit of the liars that Charlotte just assumes would be watching all of this. She refers to the liars as her dolls and insists that she loves all of them. And yeah, we're going a little bit back into that creepy trans woman who views other women as her dolls thing that does sort of border quite a bit on the potentially distasteful and definitely feels somewhat transphobic. It might not be explicitly, but I do feel a bit hate crimed against.
Lord, help the mister who comes between me and my sister.
And that's a joke, okay? Chill, just a joke. I'm not literally saying it's a hate crime, okay? You people in the comments. I'm making you laugh, it's a funny, come on. Can't say anything these days without getting cancelled or whatever. The liars then finally escape, with Mona staying behind because we need somebody to keep watching the cameras so that we in the audience can keep learning what happened. Charlotte has another flashback where she finds her mum dead. Something which clearly impacts her because this was the only person in her life who had accepted her as who she was and who had encouraged her being trans and in her eyes actually loved her. So, you know, more sad stuff for Charlotte. I come away from this thinking that the show does want us to see Charlotte as somewhat sympathetic. We might not fully agree with everything, but we do sort of get why she is messed up and does what she does. Now, along the way, the show does happen to tie up some trans stuff for a trans twist in a way that comes across as not fully committing to that narrative decision for any purpose, except having it be a big twist that they assume you wouldn't see coming. And that, incidentally, leads to the whole thing feeling quite tacked on and unnecessary. Like, presumably, there were other ways to get to this conclusion that didn't need them to fail at doing trans representation. But regardless, let's just get to the end of the episode. Charlotte tries to blow up the facility. It doesn't work. Then we go to that scene from the beginning of the episode, which ends with Charlotte not jumping off the roof and choosing to not die.
Game over.
And that's that, I guess. End of the mid-season, and the show can go back to what it was doing otherwise, which was having all the liars go their separate ways and then jumping forwards 5 years. That's right, it's a time skip. That time-honoured mystery drama tradition. A time skip that shows the liars all looking panicked and talking about how he is coming for Allison and they need to get away from him, and it all makes me a little bit worried considering the topic of this episode. That the liars are implied here to maybe using him to refer to Charlotte, which is not a great thing to evoke during your episode featuring a trans woman.
He's coming for you. It's too late. He's already here.
Don't worry, it's not actually related to Charlotte, but you couldn't know that watching this at the time. And it does just seem as if the show is implying that they're referring to Charlotte as if Charlotte was a man in their eyes, or had gone back to being Charles. Anyway, that's the episode, the main trans one. And as I've already said quite a few times, it really doesn't feel like it. For all the fact of them making a major villain out to be a trans woman, it barely feels like they cared to actually explore that. Instead, just immediately moving on to other things and then wrapping it up real quick.
It must have been awful, you think?
However, before we make any judgments, and I do conclusionary stuff about Charlotte and move to sinking my teeth into the person responsible for this mess, there are some more episodes to talk about. As you might have guessed from how much there is left in this video, we're not quite done here just yet, as we now move on to Season 6's Episode 11, the start of the mid-season plot shift, and the one in which we will learn Charlotte's place in the remaining time left to Pretty Little Liars. Spoilers, not good.
She was murdered?
The death's been ruled a homicide, yeah.
So in this episode, titled Of Late I Think of Rosewood, well, at least it doesn't contain any dead naming or misgendering, low bar successfully passed there, it's all about where everybody is at, and Allison bringing them all back together to a court hearing for Charlotte, who she is friendly with and is trying to help, because I guess they did manage to somewhat reconnect over the past 5 years. We have an explicit scene which shows Allison meeting Charlotte in some facility somewhere and telling her that she will bring her home. And it seems pretty clear here that Charlotte is feeling somewhat sorry for all that happened.
Do you think they'll come? It's been a long time. Do you think they're still upset with me?
Like, maybe in the last 5 years, she was able to come to terms with what she did and how it was wrong, and now wants to somehow right those wrongs. Maybe Charlotte will end up becoming part of the show from here on out. Maybe we will get some more time exploring that trans element so it doesn't feel so one-off and completely fucking inconsequential. Maybe, if you shit into one hand and hope into the other hand, the hope hand could fill up faster than the shit hand. It's doubtful, but it could happen. The liars spend most of this episode just talking about whether they're going to let A go home or not. Because while they do accept that it's Charlotte and don't dead name or misgender her, they also do kinda see her still as that villain that tormented them for years, which is, frankly, pretty fair.
You're asking us to give a get-out-of-jail-free card to someone who tried to kill us.
And they also just spend a lot of time reconnecting with people and letting us in the audience see all these characters after 5 years, and find out where they're at. All of which has very little to do with Charlotte. Like, even the one scene where Allison and Elias discuss the facts about why Allison wants to get Charlotte out, and everything that has happened since then, doesn't really go into much detail except to say that she is getting support she didn't have before, and is doing much better.
5 years of treatment, undoing all the damage. You heard her story. We all went through this together.
It's almost as if Charlotte doesn't even really matter at this moment. Like, who she is and her story as it's called is not something that they care to bring up again or to really mention. Does truly feel like bringing up the trans twist was not something they wanted to further explore. Like, Pretty Little Liars, please just don't leave this hanging.
Pretty please? With sugar on top?
What?
That's what you say on a playground to exact a favor. We're not on the playground anymore. We haven't been for a long time.
The show has some really appalling writing, huh? Even the court case doesn't even really bother talking about the trans stuff, except for one of the liars saying that surely the judge has read all the reports and documents about who Charlotte is, which might be a very tacit reference to it. I mean, I appreciate the notion that a trans person's identity does not have to play a further part of their characterizations, and that by doing that, it normalizes our existence as a trans person who can do things without having their identity constantly brought up. But the issue with that is that it does still need to inform things. Being trans does still need to play a part in the character's reactions, and needs to be given space to have it being developed so it doesn't feel like it feels here. Just swept under the rug as if the writers made the trans thing, patted themselves on the back for how surprised the audience was, and then moved on without caring to further elaborate on it.
Previously on Pretty Little Liars.
Oh my god, Allie's with Charles. Cece?
The court case succeeds thanks to Allison getting the liars to lie for her about feeling safe with Charlotte released. So Charlotte gets to go home and be family with Allison, which all feels like this really does open the door for Charlotte to be in the next season and a half of the show, and perhaps get more exploration of that trans identity through her time spent with her sister.
Let your heart
Until Allison calls the liars the next day after they had a heavy drinking session, and reveals that Charlotte came back home but then went missing after the two had gone to bed. And oh no, maybe she's back to her big A ways and is gonna be a villain again.
Hospital ID card, and I saw her face. It's Charlotte De Laurentiis.
Until we find out that Charlotte's dead, on the grass outside of a church, presumably after falling from the bell tower, something which is, as we end the season finding out, a murder. I mean, at first they think it's a suicide, but nah. Charlotte is actually the instigating mystery for this half of the season, and she will not be in it as a character. Now, Charlotte doesn't completely vanish from the show after this, though obviously she doesn't get to do an Allison and come back from the grave. Instead, she gets to appear in a few flashbacks from season 7.
The terms of your release were very clear. What do you care what happens to me? You hooked up with my doctor.
Flashbacks which show exactly what happened that night when she died, revealing who her killer is, which I won't spoil because it doesn't matter, and doesn't have any relevance to her trans identity. Hooray! You can now go and watch the final season of Pretty Little Lies without worrying about spoilers. I mean, we do find out that Charlotte was sleeping with this guy who pretended to be her doctor and was using it to convince Allison to get Charlotte out of the mental facility, a guy who ends up becoming another antagonist further on in the series, trying to kill Allison because he blames her for Charlotte dying, even though he does get married to Allison too. And look, it's all crazy, sure, but it's surprisingly irrelevant.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
Like, we don't really bother exploring through Archer Dunhill, or Dr. Elliot Rollins, as you might call him, anything about Charlotte's trans identity, or his connection to that by dating her. I mean, it's mostly just used to throw out more twists and lies and deep machinations from Charlotte that really make it feel like maybe she wasn't completely remorseful and might have ended up becoming a villain again, so who fucking cares, right?
And you are the most charming woman I have ever been charmed by.
Oh, Archer, I'm sure you say that to all the girls.
At the end of the day, Charlotte's transness plays no real part of any of the flashbacks. Not even the big final one that answers all the questions about what she did when she fled to France that one time in the show, and how it ties into a bunch of the stuff that has happened. It really does feel as if Pretty Little Liars wanted to have that trans moment where it gets revealed, and then killed her and moved all mentions of her being trans into the box "do not bother talking about." I mean, we know she is trans because her story literally reflects that fact, but at no point during the show does anybody even say the word. I checked the episodes. It's not mentioned once. She was a boy when she was a child, then she had a funeral and came back as a girl, and that's that. She's just a weird girl who treats people like dolls and is hyper-possessive of her sister.
Does she think we came between her and Allie? Is that what this has all been about?
You were like my very own living doll.
I'll be honest here, at the end of all of this, my thoughts on Charlotte as a trans character is... And I know, you spent 40 minutes listening to me blather on only for it to end with me commenting, ugh. And to be honest, the most transphobic thing about all of this is the fact that it used us for a bit, and didn't really feel like it wanted to commit to actually having a trans character on the show. I mean, at the end of the day, what was the point of it? The reveal could have been literally anything else, and the show would have still continued on with not bothering exploring trans identity or connecting to trans community at all. Whew, getting quite heated here, actually. Now, with all of that said, the next and potentially final thing before the conclusion that I do really need to talk about is the actor for Charlotte and the showrunner / person responsible for all of this. Firstly, with the actor, Charlotte was played by Vanessa Ray, a straight cis woman from what I can find digging into her profile, and that kinda makes a lot of sense considering the fact that it seems pretty clear that Pretty Little Liars didn't really know for a fact they were going to make Charlotte into a trans woman until I guess they hit season 6 and one of the writers threw a dart onto the dartboard landing on secret twist villain used to be different gender and is now gender we have seen them as. Like, sure, that's not what they tell us, but it really feels like they didn't plan for this. Normally here I would talk about the importance of casting trans people to play trans roles, how it gives trans actors a break into the industry as well as allowing cis audiences to see us physically on their screens and get a closer connection to the community through that. But at the end of the day, I don't even really count Charlotte as a trans role, so yeah, CC Drake might as well have been played by a cis person. I mean, they weren't gonna do the ultra crass thing of having a guy play Charlotte for the past few seasons because they needed the trans thing to be a shock reveal after all, so it had to be a cis woman to really sell the lie, I guess. Yeah, I am just kind of bleh all over this. A blehness born from just trans identity being turned into a twist and then getting killed off like a super blatant bury your gays trope. All of which I can really put the fault of onto our next discussion point. Marlene King.
Well, you know, yes, I mean, I think...
Now, I have two interviews that I will be referring to for getting her notion of this trans inclusion on. Specifically, one she did on Entertainment Tonight, and the other that she did with the magazine People. Both of which I think combined together really let us get an idea of how she was considering this and what her takeaway of the trans representation was. So, for Entertainment Tonight, Marlene King said that they did not just jump on the trans bandwagon with this character, that they had planned all of this reveal for 3.5 years since introducing Charlotte. That Charlotte, or Charles as Marlene King calls him multiple times in the interview, being portrayed as crazy isn't intended to be seen as because being trans is crazy, but is meant to be because she is a De Laurentiis and the De Laurentises are all crazy people.
Fans got a little worried when they found out. Yeah, that's a big scoop. That's a big scoop.
Something which doesn't really address the fact that it's not actually clear what the hell was going on in the episode, and you very easily could have come away from the episode seeing Charlotte as fitting into this villainous trans sociopath trope. And the final thing that gets mentioned here by Marlene King is that the reason she didn't hire a trans actor to play Charlotte, something which would make a lot more sense considering how this was, by her own words, originally planned from the very first moment as a reveal eventually, well, the reason is that she didn't know you could hire a trans actor. That back in 2011 it wasn't a thing people were aware of in the industry. I mean, that really does cement for me that point I wanted to make about hiring trans actors. Like, hiring them to play roles lets people like Marlene King see that you can in fact hire them, that we do exist and are not just a fun little story element for you to throw into your TV show. The People magazine interview is most of the same things being repeated about how this was all planned, how they had intended all of this, while adding some additional pieces of information, such as the fact that she views the whole transgender thing as making sense out of the plot point that Charlotte is obsessed with dolls, which she felt was the right story and truthful and also sensitive to the trans community as well. What all of that really says to me, what all of those comments really cements, is just how cisgender this all is. Marlene King is very cis, very much feels like she didn't have any trans involvement in the creation of the character and in Charlotte's further appearances and storylines, and so was just kind of building all of this from stuff that she had heard about or read about us, combined with some big healthy doses of trying to do the right thing as a supportive ally of the community that doesn't really work, because if you don't have the connections, you don't know what you're doing. It's just clueless cisgender shit that falls into all the transphobic tropes because they don't know any better and didn't care to learn. As long as people use the right name most of the time and the right pronouns, did their best to somewhat vaguely make the craziness of the character not linked to her gender identity, well, then that was good enough. And the trans community better be fucking grateful that no slurs got used, am I right? All this does is make it patently obvious how transgender representation being bad doesn't just mean being negative. It can also be bad because it fails to properly represent us. It fails to actually explore trans identity or dive into our lives in a way that is important for people to see on their screens. We deserve more than just being a shock twist that gets quickly moved on from. We deserve more than a tiny, sympathetic story from an insane person who then gets murdered almost immediately afterwards. At the end of the day, I can sort of see why people I talked to about this first responded with, wait, there was a trans character in Pretty Little Liars. Oh shit, yeah, there was. I completely forgot about that. And that reaction kinda sums up a lot of the issues that I have here. Anyways, that's the video, and if you liked what you heard, or enjoyed my analysis, or just found me to be satisfactory background noise while you made a cake, or played a game, or tried to get it on with that Tinder date you brought back home, and if it's that third option, then you are bold as fuck. Putting me on for some sexy time? Some Lily and chill? It's a wild idea that I hope I'm not ruining too much right now by addressing it. If all of that is true, then please consider checking out my other videos that I have made on this channel, some of which should be popping up on the sidebar or being recommended at the end of this video. You can also like, share, subscribe, comment, all of that regular old YouTube shit too. Otherwise, the best way to support this channel and keep it going is by going to my Patreon, the links of which can be found below, and subscribing there. The names of those in the $5 and up category should be scrolling past the screens right now. And I really appreciate everybody who does pay me to do my work, because it helps a lot to get funded for it. I mean, having the bills paid does allow me to actually make YouTube videos, and the Patreon is the major way that I pay my rent and keep a roof above mine and my cat's heads. I am currently moving to a much slower schedule on YouTube, something which is intended to allow me to make much bigger and longer videos on the side. I've got a Riverdale video series that I am going to release the first of soon, and I keep talking about it, and I also want to make a Pokemon deep dive as well at some point. All of that, though, does ultimately reduce the amount of money that I get from ad revenue and YouTube specifically, so making it up through other means like Patreon goes a long way. So, yet again, huge thanks to all the people who do subscribe to that for allowing me to make my hobby into a job for as long as it has been. You are the real heroes of this channel, and the ones that do keep it going. For everybody, though, thank you for watching this video. Thank you as well to Incogni once again for sponsoring this video, and make sure to go to incogni.com/Simpson if that is something you're interested in, and I hope you have a great day. Oh, secret twist at the end. I'm actually trans, and have been this whole time. Wow, what a reveal. What a stunning moment that nobody could have seen coming. Sure hope I don't get killed now so that we can move on to something else. Nope. Nothing? Yeah. Good for me, I guess.